She shouldn't have been messing with it. I knew that. But before I could speak, my 8-year-old daughter had already reached into my sister's purse. The sound of the paper being removed broke the din of conversation in the room. All eyes turned to the scene, and my heart raced. It was just innocent fun, until she opened the envelope. Inside was a single photo, but it wasn't just any picture. As soon as the little girl lifted the paper and turned it over for us to see, it was as if time froze. My sister went white. My mother, who never showed emotion, dropped the cup and shattered it on the floor. I could only take a step forward, trying to grasp what exactly was before our eyes. The image was old, faded. It showed 3 people standing in an open field under a cloudy sky. But what made me freeze was recognizing my father, dead for 20 years, next to an unknown woman, holding a baby. My sister snatched the photo from my daughter's hand with a violence no one expected, and then the silence became unbearable. "Who is this woman?" I asked, my voice broken. My sister didn't answer. She just put the envelope back, trembling. The mood changed. That afternoon, which had begun with laughter and memories, now felt like the beginning of an avalanche. And I already sensed that what was coming would change everything we thought we knew about our family. Share this story to reach further, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. But for you to understand what this photo really meant, I need to go back in time, because this wasn't the first time my sister hid something from all of us, and what she was hiding is much bigger than anyone could have imagined. When we were kids, my sister was always my mother's favorite. Beautiful, intelligent, and always had the right answers. I grew up in her shadow, trying to be seen, and even when I did everything right, all it took was for her to appear in the room for me to disappear again. This difference always hurt, but I learned to live with it. At 16, my sister acted very strange for a while. She would lock herself in her room and cry without explaining why. They said it was teenage drama, but I could see in her eyes that it was something more serious. One night, I heard her and our mother arguing. She was yelling and accusing, and my mother begged her to keep quiet. That's when I realized they shared a secret. I never had the courage to ask what it was. I didn't want to be ignored or treated like a child anymore, so I walked away. And for many years, we continued to live superficially. She built her life, I built mine, but I never forgot the way she looked at certain people, as if she carried guilt. Now, looking at that photo, everything made sense. The woman in the image was the same one from a blurry memory I had from childhood. A quick visit, a hushed conversation behind my mother's bedroom door. The baby, maybe it was hers. Maybe it was our brother. But why hide something like that for so long? In that moment, all I wanted were answers, but my sister looked panicked. And when my daughter innocently asked, "Is that Grandpa?" my sister screamed at her like never before. The entire room stopped. It wasn't just about the photo anymore. It was about a lifetime of lies. And now, they were coming to light. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the photo wouldn't leave my mind. I rummaged through old drawers, searching for albums, letters, anything that would help me understand. It was as if a door had been opened, and now forgotten voices whispered in the darkness. The silence of the house made me restless, and the echoes of the past seemed louder than ever. The next morning, I called my mother. At first, she pretended not to know what I was talking about, but when I mentioned the photo, the silence on the other end was deafening. "This should have been buried already," she said, and before I could respond, she hung up. I felt a weight on my chest. It was clear. Something very serious had been hidden for decades. I returned to my sister's house unannounced. When she saw me at the door, the fear on her face spoke volumes. I entered without asking permission, and got straight to the point. "You have a son no one knows about?" She paled, gripping the chair as if she were about to faint. Then she cried, a suppressed, painful cry, as if she'd been holding it in for a long time. "No one was supposed to know," she said. "It was supposed to be erased." And so she began to tell the story. At 17, she became pregnant. My father, upon finding out, was furious. He said it would ruin the family's image. They hid everything. They sent her to an aunt's house in another state, delivered the baby in secret, and gave the baby up for adoption. But something went wrong. He was never delivered, she said. Someone kept him. I didn't understand. "Who?" I asked. That's when she whispered, "Mommy." My throat felt dry. My mother always acted as if nothing fazed her. But hiding a grandson? Creating this lie in silence? The world around me began to spin, and I knew the truth hadn't quite arrived yet. The image of my mother secretly raising a grandson seemed impossible, but my sister swore it was true. She kept him close for a short time. Then he disappeared. She forbade me from looking for him. I no longer knew what was real. I decided to go to my mother's house, alone. I needed to look her in the eye and hear this story from the only person who could still confirm it. When I arrived, she was sitting on the porch, sewing as she always did. I sat across from her and asked directly, "Where is my sister's son?" For a moment, she didn't even blink. She continued sewing as if she hadn't heard. But then, without looking at me, she said, "You shouldn't have opened that wound." That was all I needed to know it was true. I persisted. I screamed. I cried. She was silent, but when I got up to leave, something changed. "He's here," she said. Or at least, he was. I froze. She struggled to her feet and called me over. I followed her down the stairs to the basement, a place we were never allowed as children. The air down there was heavy, cold, and dark. She turned on a dim light and pointed to an old wooden box in the corner. Inside were old toys, a blue blanket, and a diary. I picked up the notebook with trembling hands. The pages were yellowed, with my mother's firm handwriting. Joshua, day 3. He slept well, but he still cries at night. I turned more pages. Each one told details of a baby's life, a hidden baby. My mother stood there, silent. He stayed here until he was 4. Then, his father showed up and took him. I asked who the father was. She hesitated. Someone who should never have gotten involved with our family. It sounded like venom. And I understood. There were more secrets. Much more. And the name Joshua now weighed heavily on my mind. Who was he? Where was he? I returned home with the diary clutched to my chest. I felt like I was carrying a bomb, something that could explode at any moment. The image of that basement, the blue blanket, my mother's handwriting, haunted me. Joshua, such a common name, but now filled with mystery and pain. With each page I read, my mind conjured up images of that invisible boy. I called my sister. She answered with a choked voice. "Joshua," I said, and on the other end, silence. "Was that the name?" She nodded with a sob. "I've dreamed of that name, for years. I thought it was all in my head." She said she sometimes felt a presence, as if a piece of her had been ripped away, but it still whispered in her dreams. Now everything made sense. I spent the night reading the diary. Each entry my mother made was cold, technical, as if she were recording the life of a stranger. But in some passages, there was emotion. One sentence stuck with me. "He looks at me like he knows everything." Who was Joshua, really? Why was he taken? And most importantly, by whom? My mother didn't reveal his name, but the fear in her eyes said it all. The next morning, I received a strange text message from an unknown number with only the phrase, "He's looking for you." My blood ran cold. I replied, but the message never arrived. I showed it to my sister and she went pale. "It's him," I said. "It's Joshua." It took my breath away. How did he know? How did he find us? And why now? We decided to search for clues. Social media, public records, everything. But we didn't know where to begin. Joshua might have another name, another identity. He might not even be alive. But if that message was real, then he knew who we were and what happened to him. And we, now, were part of a truth that was never ours to hide. It was my sister who came up with the idea of searching for the files from the hospital where she gave birth. Even though decades had passed, perhaps something had slipped our mother's radar. We used the fake name she revealed she'd used at the time. We made up a story to convince the attendant to help us. The woman, taking pity, let us see a dusty folder. There were only a few pages, the birth record, the doctor's name, an old address. But then we found a scribbled note, minor transferred to child psychiatric care, 1999. I looked at my sister in shock. Joshua was taken to a clinic? Why? What happened to him after he was taken from the basement? That word, psychiatric, laden with the sentence. Did he have something wrong? I asked. My sister was silent. Then, without looking up, she said, "He was born different." She had always known. Joshua was extremely sensitive, had crying spells, and had constant nightmares. Mom said he saw things. Her tone was serious, almost afraid. We drove to the clinic's address, which was now a parking lot. No trace, no employees, just memories buried in the concrete. But the neighbor next door to the old institution told us something strange. There was a boy who sometimes ran away. He said he'd go home to see his mother in secret. That pierced me like a knife. Joshua tried to turn back. He would appear here, sitting at the gate. the woman said. He would look at the sky and talk to the clouds. I almost cried. A boy ripped from his mother, hidden in a basement, thrown into a hospital, and then forgotten. And yet, he tried to return. He tried to remember. Joshua was alive, and if he was truly looking for us, then he deserved to know everything, including the truth we didn't yet know. The following weeks were emotional chaos. I couldn't concentrate on anything anymore. My work began to suffer, and my daughter asked me why I was always crying. But how do you explain to a child that their long-lost uncle might be alive, and that he'd been erased from history by the very people who were supposed to protect him? My sister and I were in pieces, but we couldn't stop. One day, we were at a market downtown. I was pushing the cart while my sister browsed some fruit. That's when I saw it. A man standing across the street, staring at me. It was like a punch in the gut. Tall, thin, with intense eyes. I don't know how, but I knew. It was him, Joshua. I tried to run across, but he turned the corner and disappeared. I ran like crazy. I screamed his name. Joshua! People looked at me like I was crazy, but I swear, he paused for a second before disappearing. There was something in his gaze. Recognition? Pain? Fear? I don't know. I walked back to the market trembling. My sister was speechless. Did you see him? I could only nod. And then she burst into the loudest sobs I'd ever seen. We decided to leave a note there. We wrote it by hand, from the heart. Joshua, we are your sisters. We won't run away. Please talk to us. We nailed it to the market wall and left an anonymous cell phone number. And every day, we returned, waiting, searching, afraid, but also hopeful. He was near. I could feel it. A week later, the message arrived. Just a photo. It was the facade of our mother's house. The caption, "Remember this?" It was him. Joshua was coming back. We didn't know why, or what he knew about all this, but we knew we were about to face the past head-on, and no one could hide the truth anymore. On Saturday night, my sister and I were sitting in our mother's kitchen. The tension was incredible. Every noise outside made us jump. My daughter was with a cousin. We wanted privacy. It was the first time in decades we were all together. The old wooden table seemed to shrink before what was to come. My mother said nothing. She was stiff, cold. She held a wine glass like a shield. "He's coming," I said. She just took a deep breath. "He should never have come back." My stomach turned. "He should never have been taken away," my sister snapped. For the first time, she stood up to our mother. And that's when we heard it. The doorbell. Twice. I went to open it myself. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob. When I opened the door, there he was. Older than I expected, with lines of suffering on his face, but with the same eyes as in the photo. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. My sister appeared beside me, and when their eyes met, she fell to her knees, crying. He entered slowly, as if unsure of his welcome. He sat at the table without saying a word. My mother stared at him as if she'd seen a ghost. "Hi, Mom," he said, and it was like an explosion. She threw her glass against the wall, screaming, "You're not my son!" My sister stood up, yelling back. I froze. That house had become a battlefield. It was Joshua who brought the silence back. "I just want to know who I am," he said, his voice firmer than I expected, and why I was treated like a mistake. That disarmed everything. The old lie was now on its knees, and we knew no one would emerge from that night without scars, but also without the truth. We were at the point of no return. Joshua looked into our mother's eyes as if expecting an apology, but she looked away, her mouth set tightly and her fingers trembling. "You don't understand," she said. "It wasn't my choice." My sister exploded. "You lied to everyone. To me. To him." The weight of those words filled the room like smoke. All I could hear was my heart pounding. "You think you know what happened, but you don't know the half of it," our mother said, struggling to her feet. She went to the closet, pulled out an old wooden box, and threw it on the table. Inside were documents, letters, torn photos, all filled with dust and pain. I picked up one of the letters. It was from Joshua's father, a name I'd never heard before, but the handwriting was my father's. My sister grabbed the letter with trembling hands. She read it and began to cry. "It was him," she whispered. "Daddy, She didn't finish her sentence, but I understood. Joshua was our father's son, not some random boyfriend's. My father had gotten his own daughter pregnant, and our mother, upon finding out, decided to bury everything. Literally, the pain was so great that I felt sick. Joshua was pale. "Is it true?" he asked. No one answered. Only silence answered for everyone. My mother turned away, as if everything was too old to be disturbed. My sister sat down in shock, and I felt the ground disappear. That photo, the baby, now it all made horrible sense. A rotten past, hidden under the rug of our childhood. Did you hide me to protect him? Joshua asked. Or to protect yourself? She turned and looked at him with the coldest eyes I'd ever seen. I hid you because no one needed to know what happened in that house. That's when I understood. Our mother hadn't saved anyone. She'd only tried to erase her own failure. And now, the monster she'd buried was back. Joshua stood up. He took off his shirt, saying nothing. What we saw next was a shock. Scars, marks, old burns. My sister screamed. I covered my mouth. The foster home, the hospital, my last family's house. He was returned 3 times. He was beaten for seeing things, for speaking to voices. The places that were supposed to save him destroyed him. I just wanted to go back, he said, looking at us. But every time I tried, I hit an invisible wall. The institutions told him he was unstable, that no one wanted him. But deep down, he just wanted to know why he was abandoned. I'm not a monster, but you made me believe I was. Guilt hung in the air like a suffocating fog. My sister stood up, crossed the room and hugged him. A desperate hug, one of lost years. She wept as if trying to piece together time. You are my son, she repeated. You are my son. I'd never seen her like that. It was as if she were being reborn there, in pieces. Joshua froze for a moment, then hugged back tightly. My mother watched from afar. She didn't cry. She didn't react. She just stood there, motionless, like a stone statue. Did you know what he went through? I asked. She didn't answer. Then Joshua, in a calm voice, said, You may not recognize me as your son, but I am the reflection of your decisions. And that was more powerful than any scream. His pain wasn't just physical. It was an entire soul carrying absence, rejection, and violence. Joshua was the living scar of a family that pretended not to bleed. But now, the wound was open, and we all needed to look at it, without looking away. For the first time, he wasn't alone, and this was the beginning of something new. The room was plunged into a heavy silence. Joshua and my sister were still hugging. I didn't know where to place my hands, my gaze, my pain. And then, suddenly, our mother collapsed, like an old tree falling alone in the middle of a field. She fell back into the chair and began to cry. Not a pretty, soap opera-like cry. It was a harsh, ugly sound that seemed to come from the pit of her stomach. I tried to protect you, she stammered, but it all got out of hand. She said she knew what her father had done, that when my sister turned up pregnant, she went crazy. He was my husband, my pride. How could he do that to his own daughter? Her voice was a thread, a mixture of hate, fear, and shame. For the first time, I saw my human mother. She said she tried to force our father to come forward, but he threatened to kill her if she said anything. She said fear paralyzed her, that the secret became a cancer inside her. When Joshua was born, she saw in him a living reminder of what had happened. I couldn't love him, she confessed, but I couldn't kill him either. So she hid. She isolated. She buried the problem, never resolving it. My heart ached for her, but even more for Joshua. Hearing that his grandmother had considered taking him away from the world, even though she hadn't, was cruel, but he remained calm. He looked at her and said, I don't hate you. Those words were a bitter blessing. She cried even harder. That pain needed to be exposed, or it would never leave anyone. I'm not your mother, Joshua, she said, but I failed as a grandmother, and I failed as your mother's mother. He just nodded. It was the most mature forgiveness I'd ever seen. Silent, not a hug, but a cut that, instead of festering, began to heal. The truth had been told, but the damage, that was still all on the table. The following Sunday we had lunch. Something simple, but symbolic. For the first time in decades, my sister Joshua and I were together. No yelling, no lies, no secrets hanging in the air. My daughter ran around the house, not understanding the depth of it all, but maybe it was for the best. She saw Joshua only as he is now, a tall, quiet uncle with kind eyes. My mother didn't participate. She stayed in her room. She said she needed time, and we respected that. She had carried that secret for too long. Now that everything had come to light, she seemed broken inside, but maybe she was also beginning to rebuild herself, not with hugs or smiles, but with the silence of someone who had finally stopped pretending. Joshua was still a mystery. He spoke little, observed a lot, but his presence was no longer a threat. It was a new beginning. With each dish served, with each laugh from my daughter, with each look exchanged between him and my sister, something was being restored, as if the pieces were finally finding their place again, as if the pain had a new meaning. After lunch, we went out into the backyard. My sister brought a photo, the same one from the envelope, and placed it in a simple frame. "We're not going to hide anything anymore," she said. Joshua stared at the picture for a while. Then he smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile, not with complete joy, but with peace. A rare peace, one that comes only after going through hell. That day didn't erase the lost years. It didn't fix everything, but it sealed a silent pact between us. We would never again live a lie. Joshua wasn't a mistake. He was a living scar that became a bridge. And there, amid dirty dishes and dessert scraps, our family began again, for the first time, truly. In the days that followed, I felt a strange calm. It was as if the world had stopped spinning so fast. My mother's house became quieter, as if in mourning, but also at peace. Joshua began visiting frequently. He would sit on the living room couch, drink coffee, and look at old photos with a lost look, trying to piece together the pieces of his own history. My sister started writing. She said she needed to record everything before the details slipped away. A way to forgive herself, perhaps. She and Joshua would talk for hours, rehashing memories that never existed, making up stories that could have been real. It was beautiful and sad at the same time, a reconstruction made with words and care. One day, my daughter sat on Joshua's lap and asked, "Were you a ghost before?" He laughed and replied, "Maybe, but now I'm human." I almost cried. That answer said it all. He'd spent years invisible, faceless, nameless, without a place. Now, even though the wounds still burned, he existed, and only those who have been erased know what that means. My mother, little by little, began to come down to breakfast. She remained silent, watching. Sometimes she exchanged a glance with Joshua. No words, but there was something there, a kind of silent recognition. It wasn't love, it was the weight of responsibility that, even late, she had decided to carry. He no longer demanded anything. She no longer promised anything. It was what she could get. That house was no longer a field of lies. There was still pain, of course, but now it breathed truth, and I understood that sometimes what destroys a family isn't the mistakes, but the silences. And in that place, so full of old noises, the silence had finally changed shape. It became space, and who would have thought, even hope. Today, Joshua lives a few blocks from me. He works as a carpenter, and they say he has magical hands with wood. He makes toys, simple furniture, and repairs. And, over time, he became part of the neighborhood. No one there knows the full story, but everyone knows he's someone who has survived a lot, and that's enough. My daughter calls him Uncle Jay. They have a beautiful connection. Sometimes I look at them together and find myself imagining what it would have been like if he had grown up with us. If he had had birthdays, Christmases, silly fights, and afternoons spent on the couch with us. But he didn't, and yet, he came back. He chose to come back. That, to me, is the greatest kind of courage there is. My sister still carries a lot of guilt, but Joshua never again brings up the past in anger. He seems to have accepted everything, not because forgiveness is easy, but because continuing to hate keeps him trapped in the same place where he was hurt. He wants to live, he wants to belong, and we've learned to embrace him, not as a victim, but as part of who we are now. Sometimes my mother watches from afar. She's getting old fast, but on Sundays when everyone gets together, she goes to the backyard, sits nearby, and listens. She doesn't say much, but I've seen her smile at Joshua once or twice. Small gestures that say more than an apology. She may never say, "I'm sorry," but his presence, she accepts it. And if you ask if Joshua is okay today, I'd say yes. He still has shadows, of course, but he built light with what's left, and that no one can take away. He still lives here. Not just on the next street, but within the story that, despite everything, he decided to rewrite with us. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos, and share this video with someone on WhatsApp, someone who might need to hear this today. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'll love reading each and every one of you. Until the next story.